A talented waitress at the elegant Le Bernardin always knew she was different from the other staff, but she kept her exceptional skills hidden until the night an elderly Chinese customer panicked at the reception, desperately struggling to communicate in broken English. Maya Chin made a decision that would change her life forever. She left her section to help the man in his native language, demonstrating an impeccable fluency in Mandarin that left everyone impressed. What she didn't know was that the millionaire owner Robert Sterling was watching her every move, and that her natural kindness would awaken something dark in a man who valued control over compassion. The next morning, Maya received a call that would leave her in shock, but sometimes, losing everything is the first step to discovering who you really are.
Hello. Before we begin, please subscribe to the channel and leave a like. At the end, please rate the story. I will be happy to respond to you in the comments. Now, let's get to the story.
The soft sound of the piano echoed through the Italian marble-clad walls of Le Bernardin, creating an atmosphere of sophistication that only money could buy. Golden lights hung delicately over tables covered with immaculate white linen, where baccarat crystals reflected the light like small diamonds. The aroma of black truffles and French champagne lingered in the air, mingling with the discreet perfume of the orchid arrangements adorning each table. Robert Sterling had created more than a restaurant. He had created a sanctuary for Chicago's elite, where businessmen closed million-dollar deals between a caviar appetizer and a lobster main course. Reservations were fiercely contested months in advance, and a single meal for two could easily cost over $500. Amidst this opulence, Maya Chin moved like a silent dancer, her steps measured and elegant on the marble floor. At 26, she had perfected the art of being almost invisible, present only when necessary, discreet as a well-mannered shadow. Her posture was impeccable, straight back, hands always in the right place, a professional smile that never wavered, even when customers treated her as if she were part of the decor. "Good evening, gentlemen," she said in her soft, almost musical voice, slightly bowing as she presented the wine list to a table of executives. "May I suggest our Chateau Margaux 2010? It's an excellent choice to accompany the chef's menu this evening." The suited men examined her for a moment, not her eyes, but her appearance, as if assessing a decorative object. Maya maintained her smile, her eyes respectfully lowered, while feeling the familiar weight of those gazes that reduced her to just another pretty young woman serving important people. "Perfect," one of them replied, not even looking at her. "And bring it quickly, we're in a hurry." Maya nodded gracefully. "Certainly, sir. It will be a pleasure." As she headed to the bar, her thoughts flew to long distances. Each calculated step, each refined gesture she had learned to execute, carried the weight of a story that the customers would never imagine. Her parents, Li Wei and Mei Chin, had arrived from Guangdong province nearly 30 years ago, carrying only 2 suitcases and an impossible dream that their daughter could have the life they never had. She remembered her father's calloused hands, who worked 16 hours a day in a cheap Chinese restaurant on the south side, dreaming that one day Maya would not have to bow before anyone. Her mother, May, cleaned offices during the night and cared for the elderly during the day, saving every penny left over for their daughter's education fund. "Education, Maya," her father used to say in Mandarin, his tired eyes shining with fierce hope. "Education is the only thing they can't take away from you." Maya had graduated with a degree in English literature from Northwestern University, an achievement that cost her parents not only money but years of their own health and youth. She remembered the graduation, seeing the tears of pride in her parents' eyes as she walked across the stage, the first in the family to earn a college degree. But life, as she had discovered, did not follow fairy tale scripts. Jobs in literature were rare, and bills did not wait for ideal opportunities. When she got the job at Le Bernardin, her parents were relieved. Finally, she was in a respectable place, serving important people. If only they knew how these important people treated her. During her 15-minute break, Maya took refuge in the staff locker room, a stark contrast to the elegance of the restaurant. Peeling walls, old lockers, and a wooden bench that creaked with every movement. She picked up her phone with trembling hands, checking her messages with a tight heart. A message from her mother. "Dad had another crisis yesterday. The doctor wants to run more tests." "Don't worry, dear." Maya closed her eyes, feeling the familiar weight of worry settling in her chest like a stone. Her father, Li Wei, suffered from diabetes and hypertension, conditions exacerbated by the constant stress and irregular diet from long workdays. The medications were expensive, even with the basic insurance they could afford, and specialized tests were a luxury they could barely manage. Another message, this time from an unknown number. Medical bill overdue. Contact us to negotiate payment. She mentally calculated. Her tips from last week had been good, around $400. Added to the minimum wage, she might be able to cover part of the medical expenses. But her mother had also mentioned that the air conditioning in their apartment had broken, and with Chicago's summer approaching, it would be impossible to leave her father in the sweltering heat. Maya opened her wallet and counted the carefully folded bills. $238 in cash, plus the tips from the previous night that she hadn't counted yet. Each bill represented hours of forced smiles, of "Yes, sir," and "No, ma'am," of enduring condescending looks and comments she pretended not to hear. She thought of her mother, May, who at that very moment was probably scrubbing the floor of some office downtown, her back aching from the weight of years and hard work. At 54, May looked 70, each line on her face telling the story of sacrifices that Maya could never fully repay. "You don't need to worry about us," her mother always said. "We just want you to be happy." Happy? Maya almost laughed, but the sound came out more like a stifled sigh. How could she be happy knowing that every tip she received was earned at the cost of her own dignity? How could she be happy watching her parents age prematurely so she could serve people who spent in one meal what her family needed to survive for a month? The sound of the kitchen bell brought her back to reality. Her break was over. Maya put her phone away, checked her appearance in the foggy mirror of the locker room, and took a deep breath. Her eyes were slightly red, but nothing that a splash of cold water couldn't disguise. She approached the small, dirty sink, wetting her hands and bringing the cold water to her face. The sensation woke her up, as it always did. It was her ritual, her way of preparing to return to the stage where she played the role of Maya, the polite and helpful waitress who never complained, never showed fatigue, never let on that behind the professional smile was a young woman carrying the weight of an entire family on her shoulders. Maya adjusted her white blouse, smoothing out every wrinkle carefully. The Le Bernardin uniform was impeccable, a starched white shirt, knee-length black skirt, discreet apron tied at the waist. She checked that her dark hair was perfectly secured in a low bun, that her nails were clean, and that her black shoes were polished. Every detail mattered at Le Bernardin. Robert Sterling, the owner, was known for his obsession with perfection. He could appear at any moment, his sharp eyes examining every aspect of the restaurant like a hawk watching its prey. Maya had learned, in her 2 years working there, that the only way to survive was to be invisible in her perfection. She took a deep breath once more, filling her lungs with the heavy air of the locker room before opening the door that would lead her back to the golden world of the restaurant. "It's just another night," she told herself, repeating the mantra that helped her endure the long hours. A few hours of smiles, a few hours of courtesy, and by the end of the night, there would be enough tips for a few more days of peace for her family. The contrast was always shocking. Stepping out of the simple locker room and into the splendor of Le Bernardin was like crossing a magical door between two worlds. The refined voices of the customers, the delicate clinking of crystals, the sophisticated aroma of gourmet food, all enveloped her again like a luxurious cloak that she wore but never truly belonged to her. Maya walked toward the main dining room, her steps silent on the marble, mentally preparing for another night of performance. She checked her section, 5 tables, all already occupied by customers who looked like they had stepped out of the pages of a business magazine. Expensive suits, sparkling jewelry, conversations about investments and trips to exotic destinations. As she approached the first table, Maya adjusted her posture, lifted her chin slightly, and let the professional smile form naturally on her lips. It was time for another presentation, another night of being exactly who they expected her to be. Robert Sterling moved through Le Bernardin with the precision of a general inspecting his troops, his footsteps echoing softly on the Italian marble he had chosen himself during a business trip to Milan. At 42, Sterling carried his wealth like an invisible armor, a perfectly tailored Armani suit, a Patek Philippe watch that cost more than most people earned in a year, and that air of absolute authority that only decades of relentless success could confer. It was his monthly inspection, a ritual he performed religiously on the first Friday of every month. Sterling had learned, over 20 years of building a real estate empire from nothing, that details were everything. A crack in the marble, a smudge on a glass, a waiter who smiled less than he should, all were signs of decay that, if not corrected immediately, could spread like cancer throughout the operation. His blue eyes, cold as a Chicago winter, scanned every corner of the restaurant with the methodical precision of a machine. Was the light from the sconces at the right intensity? Were the floral arrangements fresh and perfectly positioned? Was the background music at the exact volume to allow for private conversations without creating discomfort? Sterling paused near the entrance to the kitchen, observing the synchronized ballet of waiters moving between the tables. Each of them knew they were being watched. He could see it in the almost imperceptible tension of their shoulders, in the way their movements became slightly more precise, more studied. Good. Fear was a useful tool, as long as applied in the right measure. It was then that his eyes fixed on Maya Chin, serving a table of executives near the windows overlooking Michigan Avenue. Sterling tilted his head slightly, studying her with the same intensity he would use to evaluate a potential investment. She moved with a natural grace he had noticed when he hired her 2 years ago, but there was something more, a genuine education in her gestures, a careful articulation in her words that set her apart from the other staff. He watched her slightly bow as she presented the wine bottle, the way she kept the label visible to the customers, how she held the bottle by the base with one hand while the other rested elegantly behind her back. Perfect technique, Sterling thought, but it was the naturalness with which she did this that caught his attention. "Ossetra caviar or beluga tonight, gentlemen?" he heard Maya ask, her soft, polite voice carrying a diction that suggested higher education. "The ossetra has a more delicate flavor, while the beluga offers a more intense experience." Sterling frowned imperceptibly. Too articulate, too refined. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing, but it was unusual. Most of the waiters he hired were young people desperate for money, college students or aspiring actors who saw the job as temporary. They did exactly what was expected, nothing more, nothing less. Maya Chun was different. She spoke as if she belonged to that world, as if she intimately knew the wines she served and the dishes she recommended. This unsettled him in a way he couldn't quite define. Employees should know their place, should maintain a respectful distance that never suggested they could be anything more than what they were, interchangeable parts in his well-oiled machine. Sterling had started his career as a construction worker, carrying bricks and mixing cement under the scorching Chicago sun. He knew what it meant to be at the bottom of the pyramid, knew the bitter taste of subservience. But that was exactly why he understood the importance of hierarchy. Each person should know their place and never, ever, forget where they stood in the food chain. Le Bernardin was not just a restaurant to him, it was an extension of his power, a tangible demonstration of how far a man could go through absolute determination and the willingness to do whatever it took. When millionaire executives came to dine there, when important politicians conducted business at their tables, when celebrities chose his establishment for their special occasions, Sterling felt the validation he had sought his entire life. He continued to watch Maya as she interacted with the customers. There was something in the way she addressed them, respectful, but not servile. Professional, but not subservient. As if she were equal to them in some way. Sterling pressed his lips into a thin line. This was dangerous. Employees who forgot their place had a tendency to become problematic, to question authority, to create ripples in the established order. One of the unwritten rules of success that Sterling had learned was that people should always be reminded of their position. Not through rudeness or unnecessary humiliation, but through a clear and consistent demonstration of where each person stood in the hierarchy. It was a matter of order, of efficiency, of maintaining the balance that made the entire operation run smoothly. He remembered how he had gotten there not through kindness or consideration for others' feelings, but through an unyielding ability to see people for what they really were, resources. Resources that could be optimized, reorganized, or discarded as needed. Sentimentality was a luxury that men like him could not afford. Sterling watched Maya move away from the table, carrying the empty tray with fluid movements. She discreetly greeted another passing waiter, a genuine smile briefly lighting up her face. Even that simple gesture unsettled him. Employees shouldn't be too friendly with one another, shouldn't form bonds that could compromise their primary loyalty to the company. During his years building the Sterling Properties empire, he had learned that excessive familiarity among employees led to complications. They began to see themselves as a team, as a family, and families tended to protect one another. This could lead to conspiracies, attempts at collective bargaining, and erosion of the authority he exercised over every aspect of his business. Not that he was a cruel boss. Sterling prided himself on paying competitive wages and offering adequate benefits. But kindness and weakness were different things, and he had seen many businessmen fail by confusing the two. Respect should be based on competence and results, not on feelings or personal sympathy. Maya passed by him on her way to the kitchen, keeping her eyes down in a gesture of appropriate deference. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling," she murmured, her voice carrying the respectful tone he expected from all employees. "Ms. Chen," he replied with a brief nod, watching how she continued on her way without hesitation. At least she knew how to behave in the presence of the boss. But there was something in those dark eyes, an intelligence that seemed to be constantly assessing, always thinking. Sterling did not like employees who thought too much. He preferred those who simply followed orders without question. He completed his round of the dining room, making mental notes about small adjustments that needed to be made. The temperature was a degree too low, which could make customers feel uncomfortable. Two of the younger waiters were chatting near the bar, a minor infraction, but one that needed to be corrected. The floral arrangement on table 7 was slightly misaligned. Sterling made his way to his usual table in the southeast corner of the restaurant, a strategic position that allowed him to observe the entire room while maintaining relative privacy. It was a table that never appeared in the reservation system, permanently reserved for his monthly presence and occasional important business dinners. Thomas, the maitre d', approached immediately, his movements precise and efficient. "Good evening, Mr. Sterling. May I bring your usual martini?" "Of course, Thomas. And the chef's tasting menu, as always." Sterling settled into the upholstered chair, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt with a mechanical motion. "How is the night running?" "Very well, sir. We had a few last-minute reservations, but we managed to accommodate all the customers without issues. Revenue is slightly above average for a Friday." Sterling nodded, satisfied. Numbers were the universal language of success, and Le Bernardin's numbers spoke fluently about efficiency and profit. He had invested nearly $2 million in the restaurant's renovation and decor, but the return had been consistent and substantial. As Thomas walked away to fetch his drink, Sterling allowed his eyes to scan the room again. It was his kingdom, built with the same relentless determination he had used to transform a small construction company into a $50 million real estate empire. Every detail reflected his vision, every employee danced to the rhythm he set. His eyes returned to Maya, who was now serving a table of elegant women near the main entrance. She smiled politely as she explained the ingredients of a dish, her gestures measured and professional. But Sterling noticed something that others would not see, an almost imperceptible tension in her shoulders, a way she avoided prolonged eye contact with the customers. Interesting. She was uncomfortable, but she was hiding it well. Sterling had developed a keen eye for detecting signs of weakness or instability in people. It was an essential skill in the business world, where the slightest display of vulnerability could be exploited by competitors or ambitious employees. Thomas returned with the martini, carefully placing it on the table with a perfectly speared olive. Sterling took a sip, savoring the premium gin he had personally selected for the restaurant's bar. It was important that even his own drinks represented the standards of excellence he demanded from everything associated with his name. He continued to watch Maya work, analyzing each movement as if it were a chess piece on a complex board. Employees like her were enigmas that needed to be deciphered, too educated to be ignored, but not ambitious enough to be promoted. What was her story? What kept her there? serving tables when she clearly had the capacity for much more. Sterling had learned that everyone had a price, a motivation, a weakness that could be identified and utilized when necessary. Not maliciously, but as an effective management tool. Knowing his employees meant understanding how to motivate them, how to keep them loyal, how to ensure they remain productive and satisfied enough not to seek opportunities elsewhere. While waiting for her entrance, Sterling continued his silent observation, his cold, calculating eyes registering every detail of the nighttime operation. Le Bernardin was more than an investment, it was a symbol of everything he had achieved, a demonstration that a man with enough determination could shape the world around him exactly as he wished. The glass door of Le Bernardin opened with a soft chime of the golden bell, and an elderly man entered hesitantly, his dark eyes scanning the luxurious surroundings with a mix of admiration and nervousness. Mr. Lee appeared to be in his 70s, wearing a well-kept navy suit that was clearly not as expensive as those typically worn by the establishment's patrons. His hands trembled slightly as he held a crumpled piece of paper, likely a hastily scribbled address. He approached the reception desk with cautious steps, as if walking on thin ice. The hostess, a young blonde named Jessica, greeted him with her standard professional smile, but Sterling could immediately notice from his table in the corner that something was amiss. "Good evening, sir," Jessica said, her melodic voice echoing slightly in the entrance hall. "Do you have a reservation with us tonight?" Mr. Lee blinked a few times, clearly processing the words in English before responding. Yes, reservation. Li Jiahao." His voice carried a heavy accent, each word pronounced with careful effort. He extended the crumpled paper to Jessica, his hands trembling slightly. Jessica took the paper, frowning as she tried to decipher the handwriting. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't. Could you please repeat your name?" "Li," the elderly man repeated, his voice rising slightly in frustration. "Li Jiahao. Reservation, at 8 o'clock. Jessica checked the computer screen, her fingers gliding quickly over the tablet. She checked twice, then 3 times, but her expression grew increasingly confused. "Mr. Lee, I can't find your reservation in our system. Are you sure it's for today?" Mr. Lee's face contorted in an expression of growing despair. He began to gesture, pointing to the paper and then to himself. "Reservation, yes. My grandson, he made a reservation. Important, very important." His voice was starting to get higher, and some words in Mandarin began to mix with his broken English. Sterling noticed that the customers at the nearby tables were starting to discreetly look in the direction of the commotion, their conversations becoming quieter so they could hear better what was happening. "Sir, I need you to calm down," Jessica said, maintaining her smile but with visible tension around her eyes. "I will call our manager to assist you." Thomas, the maitre d', quickly appeared, his years of experience in hospitality allowing him to identify problems before they became crises. "Good evening, sir," he said in his calming, professional voice. "I understand there is some confusion with your reservation?" Mr. Lee turned to Thomas with evident relief, as if he had finally found someone who could understand him. "Yes. Reservation for Li Jiahao. My grandson Michael, he called. Said it was, how do you say, confirmed." Thomas took the paper from Jessica's hands and examined it carefully. "I see you have a phone number here. Can I try calling to confirm the details of your reservation?" No. Mr. Lee shook his head vigorously, his agitation increasing. "Michael, he is traveling. Japan. Business. He said everything was ready. Table for 2, at 8 o'clock. Sterling watched the scene unfold with growing irritation. He could feel the tension spreading through the restaurant like invisible waves, disturbing the carefully cultivated atmosphere of elegance and tranquility. Other customers were clearly uncomfortable, their conversations becoming forced as they tried to ignore the confusion at the entrance. Mr. Lee began to speak more quickly, his frustration leading him to alternate between broken English and bursts of Mandarin. "Jiga di feng shi wa sunzi tijianda." He said it was the best restaurant. "Wading lulianga shishir." "I waited 2 hours at the hotel to get ready." Thomas and Jessica exchanged looks of helplessness. They could catch occasional words in English, but most of what Mr. Lee was saying was incomprehensible to them. The situation was becoming increasingly awkward, and Sterling could see that other staff members were starting to gather discreetly, trying to help but only contributing to the confusion. Mr. Lee. Thomas tried again, his voice maintaining professional calm despite the deteriorating situation. I understand this is frustrating. How about I get a table for you even without the reservation? I can see what is available. No! You don't understand. Mr. Lee interrupted, his voice now carrying a tone of desperation that made Sterling tighten his lips in dismay. This special night. Very special. What did Cheesy, my wife, she died a year ago. Today is, how do you say anniversary? The embarrassment deepened. Mr. Lee was visibly emotional, his hands trembling as he tried to explain the importance of the occasion. Michael said that Le Bernardin was where she always wanted to come. Very elegant, very, very beautiful. Was xiang yaowei tazwa zhijianshi. Jessica and Thomas exchanged another look, this time laden with sympathy and uncertainty. They could feel the pain in the elderly man, but they couldn't fully understand what he was trying to communicate. The language barrier was becoming an insurmountable wall between them. Sterling clenched his fists on the table, watching how the situation was affecting the atmosphere of his restaurant. He could see customers at nearby tables whispering to each other, some with expressions of sympathy, others with evident discomfort. A table of executives near the window was clearly trying to ignore the commotion, but their tense movements revealed their irritation. Can I try calling a translation service? Jessica suggested, her voice wavering. There's no time for that, Thomas murmured, discreetly checking his watch. We have other reservations coming in any moment. Mr. Lee must have sensed the hesitation in their voices, for his agitation increased even more. Please! Ching bang bang wa! I just want to honor my wife. She always dreamed of a place like this. What son lai mei ning dai ta lai? His words became an increasingly rapid mix of English and Mandarin, his frustration and emotional pain combining into an expression of desperation that was beginning to attract glances from all over the restaurant. Sterling could feel his own blood pressure rising as he watched the carefully maintained order of his establishment being disturbed. On the other side of the dining room, Maya Chun was serving desserts to a table of couples when the sound of Mr. Lee's altered voice speaking Mandarin reached her ears. She froze mid-motion, the silver spoon suspended over the chocolate mousse she was serving. The familiar words of her mother tongue cut through the environment like a sharp blade, awakening memories of conversations with her own parents, of moments of frustration when they struggled to communicate in English. Maya immediately recognized the tone of desperation in the elderly man's voice, the way he alternated between the two languages when emotion made the English words inaccessible. Excuse me for a moment, she murmured to her customers, carefully placing the dessert plates on the table. She turned toward the reception, where she could see the elderly man gesturing as Thomas and Jessica tried to calm him. Maya hesitated, her feet planted halfway between her table and the confusion at the entrance. She looked at her section. She still had 2 other tables to serve, pending orders in the kitchen, and she knew that leaving her post without permission could result in disciplinary issues. The rules of Le Bernardin were clear. Every employee should remain in their designated area, focusing exclusively on their responsibilities. But the words in Mandarin kept reaching her, laden with a pain she recognized deeply. It was the same pain she had seen in her father's eyes when he tried to explain his symptoms to doctors, when his limited education in English made him feel small and misunderstood in a world that seemed designed to exclude him. Maya stood still for a moment that felt like an eternity, torn between the safety of her responsibilities and the irresistible pull of human compassion. Maya took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she made the decision that would change everything. The sound of distress in Mandarin echoing through the elegant restaurant was something she simply could not ignore. She stepped away from her table, her footsteps silent on the polished marble, moving with cautious determination toward the lobby. Lao xianxing, qing bia danqin, Maya said softly, her voice flowing in perfect Mandarin as she approached the elderly man. The elegance of her pronunciation was immediately evident, each tone precise, each syllable shaped with the grace of someone who completely mastered the language. Mr. Li turned abruptly upon hearing his mother tongue, his eyes widening in surprise and relief. Ah! Ni hui shuo zhongwen! His voice carried a deep gratitude, as if Maya were a savior appearing in his moment of greatest need. Sure de wa hui. Wa jiao Maya, she replied, bowing slightly in an appropriate gesture of respect. Qingwen, nin zaijili yu dao le shemi kunin? Her choice of words was careful, formal, showing due respect for Mr. Li's age and position. Thomas and Jessica stepped back slightly, their gazes fixed on Maya with a mix of astonishment and admiration. They could immediately feel the change in the atmosphere. The tension that had built up over the last few minutes began to dissipate like mist in the morning sun. What does Sunzige what English was he? Mr. Li explained, his voice now calm and more controlled. Danshur tamen shuo meyo wa diyuding. Jing tian shur wa chizi tsushuri zhonyan junianri. Maya listened attentively, her eyes softening with understanding and compassion. What ming bai le, jidui nin lai shuo shur fei chang zhong yao de tian. Rang what banju nin chai zhao xia. She turned to Thomas with a gentle smile. Thomas, Mr. Li is here for a very special dinner. His grandson Michael made a reservation for him, but there may have been some communication issue. Today marks a year since his wife passed away, and this restaurant was her dream. Thomas nodded immediately, his professional expression mingling with genuine sympathy. Of course, Maya. I'll check our system again and see if we can accommodate him. Maya turned her attention back to Mr. Li, continuing in Mandarin. Nin byung danchin, women hui zhaogu hao nin de. Nin yuanigan walai ma? Waki bangju nin xuanzakaden. Ni tai hao le. Mr. Li replied, his words laden with emotion. Wajin de hin gangxi. Zaijali rinshur ni jiang de hao rin, wa de chizi zai tian wei ye hui hin gaoxing. Maya guided him gently to a table near the windows, a spot overlooking the lights of Michigan Avenue that sparkled like diamonds against the darkness of the night. She pulled the chair out for him with a respectful gesture, waiting for him to settle before sitting down across from him. Nin shirt song zhongwa lai de ma? Maya asked, her voice maintaining the appropriate formal and respectful tone. Sure de, what song Shanghai lai? What jinging ijia shir de jinchuka gongsi? Mr. Li explained, his posture visibly relaxing. Jitsi lai megwa sure while tampan yide shin de hutong. Don wa xiang zaijili wei wa de chizis wa dian tibi de sure. Maya listened with respectful attention, occasionally making small sounds of understanding. Nin de chizi yiding sure yij fei chang tibi de nurin. Nin ning gao suwei xie guan yu ta de sure ma? Mr. Li's eyes lit up, even through the tears forming. Ta jiao mei ling women jiahuan lu sishuan yen. Ta zong sure ming xiang ning tsu yij xiang jiang de difang, yuya, piaoyang, chongman langman. Maya nodded in understanding, carefully picking up the menu. Na women jiao wei mei ling nai nai xuanza zui hao det sai bia. Rang wa xiang nin jia xiao yixia women jintian de tis. She opened the menu and began to translate, not just the words, but the cultural context behind each dish. Zhe dao gan bei sure women de jiao pai tsai xinxian de xinghao, pei you jiang xiang qi he xiangzi. Kugan fei chang qingxiang, jiao xiang hai de weifing. Mr. Li listened with growing interest, occasionally asking questions about the ingredients and preparation methods. Maya answered patiently and knowledgeably, explaining not only what the dishes were, but why they were special, how they were prepared, and what would be the best wine pairing. Nin jud mei ling nai nai hui shi huan jigama? Maya asked, pointing to the herb-crusted salmon dish. Taiji dohan shi huan yu. Mr. Li replied, smiling for the first time since he had arrived. Ta shuo yu dai biao ji chang shou he xingfu. Maya smiled warmly. Na zhi jiu sure wan mei de xuanza. Wahai tijian iquan lizi burgundy de baijio, ta hui wan mei de buchong zhi dao tsai de wei dao. As Maya conversed with Mr. Li, other staff members discreetly gathered around the reception desk, watching the interaction with evident astonishment. Jessica whispered to another waiter. I had no idea Maya spoke Chinese. And so well! It's like she grew up there. Thomas nodded, impressed. She not only speaks the language, she completely understands the culture. Look how she addresses him with such respect, how she knows the appropriate formalities. Sarah, one of the newer waitresses, approached the group. Maya has always been different from the others. She knows wines better than any of us, knows about art, literature. I've always wondered what her story was. Well, now we know she's multilingual, Jessica murmured. I bet she speaks more languages besides Chinese. Across the room, Robert Sterling watched the scene with an expression that gradually became darker. Initially, he had felt relief when Maya approached and began to resolve the issue that was disturbing the atmosphere of his restaurant. But now, watching her speak fluently in Mandarin, demonstrating a level of cultural sophistication that rivaled that of his most educated customers, something different began to grow in his chest. It was not just surprise, it was discomfort. A waitress who spoke fluent Mandarin was not just a waitress. She was someone with education, with background, with possibilities that extended far beyond serving tables in his restaurant. And that deeply unsettled him. Sterling watched as Maya gestured gracefully while explaining something about the menu to Mr. Lee, how her posture and mannerisms fit perfectly into the restaurant's elegant environment. She was not just doing her job, she was being herself, and that herself clearly belonged to a world very different from what he had assumed. His hands clenched into fists on the table as he processed his observations. Employees were supposed to be predictable, controllable, easily categorizable. Maya Chin was revealing herself to be something much more complex, and Sterling did not like complexity on his payroll. Qingnin Man Yong, Maya said, gracefully rising from the table after helping Mr. Lee place his order. Rugua nin xiao ren ha bangju, qing sui shi jiawa. Fei chan gangxi ni. Mr. Lee replied, briefly holding her hand in a gesture of deep gratitude. Ni rongwa gandao zai zhili yo jia de wenwan. What de cheesy hui wei ni de shanliang er gaoxing. Maya bowed slightly once more before stepping away, returning to her section with silent steps. She was smiling softly, pleased to have helped someone in a moment of need, completely unaware that her act of kindness had awakened something much more sinister in her employer's eyes. Sterling continued to watch her as she resumed her tasks, serving her customers with the same professional efficiency as always. But now he saw everything with new eyes: the way she moved, how she spoke, how she interacted with the customers. It was not just competence, it was naturalness, as if she belonged to that world of sophistication and elegance. And that realization made something dark and uncomfortable settle in his chest, a shadow that would grow in the following days until it became an obsession that would change their lives forever. The morning sun filtered through the windows of Le Bernardin as Maya pushed open the staff door, her keys jingling softly on the keychain. It was only 7:30 in the morning, but she always arrived early, an hour before her official shift started. She enjoyed the restaurant's morning tranquility, when the tables were still empty and the golden light danced over the polished surfaces. "Good morning, Thomas," she greeted cheerfully, finding the maitre d' organizing the day's special menus. Her voice carried a particular lightness this morning, still warmed by Mr. Lee's gratitude from the night before. "Ah, Maya!" "Good morning," Thomas replied with a genuine smile. "I wanted to thank you again for what you did yesterday. Mr. Lee left here beaming with happiness. He even left a letter for you." Maya felt her heart warm as Thomas handed her a carefully folded envelope. "He really didn't have to," she murmured, but her eyes sparkled with pleasure as she tucked the letter into her pocket to read later. "You were amazing yesterday," Jessica said, approaching with a tray of clean glasses. "I had no idea you spoke Mandarin. And so well! What did you learn?" Maya smiled modestly as she tied her apron around her waist. "My family. I grew up bilingual. I always thought it was something normal until I moved here and realized not everyone had the same experience. Well, it was a real lifesaver," said Carlos, the sommelier, passing by them. "The poor man was almost in a panic. You completely turned the situation around." Maya headed to the staff area, checking her appearance in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Her hair was perfectly styled in a low bun, her white blouse immaculate, and her black shoes polished to a shine. She always took pride in her professional appearance, knowing that at Le Bernardin, every detail mattered. "Maya, can you come here for a moment?" Sarah's voice, the assistant manager, cut through her thoughts. There was something in the tone, a formality that wasn't usually present in their casual interactions. Maya turned, noticing that Sarah was avoiding direct eye contact. "Sure, Sarah. Is there a problem? Just come to the office, please." Maya followed Sarah down the narrow hallway leading to the administrative offices, an area of the restaurant she rarely visited. Her footsteps were muffled by the gray carpet, and she could hear the distant sound of the kitchen staff starting preparations for lunch. When Sarah opened the office door, Maya immediately saw Robert Sterling sitting behind the desk, his fingers intertwined over an open folder. He didn't look up when she entered, keeping his focus on the papers in front of him with a concentration that seemed deliberately cold. "Sit down, Maya," Sarah said, her voice sounding strangely tense. Maya settled into the metal chair across from the desk, her hands instinctively clasping in her lap. Something was wrong. She could feel it in the heavy atmosphere of the small office, in the way Sterling maintained his carefully neutral expression. "Mr. Sterling?" she said softly, trying to understand what was happening. Sterling finally looked up, and Maya felt a chill run down her spine. There was something cold in his gaze, a distance that hadn't been there in previous interactions. He studied her for a long, uncomfortable moment before speaking. "Maya, your services at Le Bernardin will no longer be required. Effective immediately." The words fell in the small office like stones in a quiet lake. Maya blinked several times, trying to process what she had just heard. Her heart began to race, and she felt a wave of heat rise up her neck. I'm sorry, I didn't understand. My services. You are being let go," Sterling said, his voice maintaining the same professional and cold tone. "You need to collect your belongings and leave the premises." Maya leaned forward, her hands tightening. But I don't understand. Did I do something wrong? Was there a complaint?" Sterling didn't respond immediately. He flipped through the papers in front of him with deliberate movements, as if reviewing information, although Maya could see he wasn't actually reading anything. "It's a business decision," he finally said, his words coming out sharp and definitive. "A business decision?" Maya repeated, her voice rising slightly. "But Mr. Sterling, I've worked here for 2 years. I've never received a single complaint. My schedules are perfect, my clients always praise my service." "The decision is made," Sterling interrupted, closing the folder with a sharp sound. Maya looked at Sarah, searching for some sign of support or explanation, but the assistant manager kept her eyes fixed on her own hands. It was as if she was as surprised as Maya but didn't dare question the decision. "Please," Maya said, her voice beginning to tremble slightly. "I need to understand what I did wrong. How can I improve if I don't know what the problem was?" Sterling watched her for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly. "There is nothing to improve. There simply is no longer a position for you here. But last night, I helped Mr. Lee. I resolved a difficult situation. I thought that. Last night you left your section without permission," Sterling said, his voice now carrying a sharp edge. "You disrupted the established order of the restaurant." Maya felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. I was trying to help. Thomas and Jessica were having difficulties, and I thought. You weren't paid to think," Sterling cut in. "You were paid to serve your tables. Nothing more." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. Maya could hear the sound of her own breathing, the distant ticking of the clock on the wall. Tears began to form in her eyes, but she fought to keep them under control. "How much time do I have?" she asked, her voice coming out as a whisper. "No," Sterling replied, standing up from his chair. "Sarah will accompany you to collect your belongings." Maya remained seated for a moment, trying to process the reality of what was happening. 2 hours ago, she had arrived at work happy and confident. Now, she was being escorted out as if she had committed some terrible crime. Come on, Maya, Sarah said gently, touching her shoulder. Let's get your things. Maya stood up with trembling legs, following Sarah back to the staff area. She could feel the curious gazes of the other staff members as she passed, their low voices stopping abruptly when they saw her. Her small locker contained little, some makeup, an extra blouse, a spare pair of shoes, and Mr. Lee's letter that she hadn't read yet. Her hands trembled as she put everything into a small paper bag. Maya, what's happening? Thomas asked, approaching with a worried expression. She couldn't respond immediately. The tears she had been holding back finally began to stream down her cheeks. I was fired, she managed to say. Fired? Jessica exclaimed, quickly coming closer. But why? You're one of the best employees we have. Maya shook her head, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. I don't know. Mr. Sterling said it was a business decision, that I left my section last night. That's ridiculous, Carlos said, joining the group. You saved the situation yesterday. If you hadn't helped, we would have had a much bigger crisis. Sarah stood by, clearly uncomfortable with the situation but offering no further explanation. Maya, you need to leave now, she said gently. Maya closed the locker for the last time, the sound of the metal echoing in the tense silence. She turned to her colleagues, trying to smile through her tears. Thank you all for everything, she said, her voice breaking slightly. You were more than co-workers. You were true friends. Thomas stepped forward and hugged her briefly. This isn't right, Maya. This isn't right at all. Maya nodded, grabbing her bag and following Sarah toward the staff exit. She could feel her colleagues' gazes on her back, hear their confused and indignant whispers. When they reached the door, Sarah stopped. Maya, I'm so sorry. I truly am. Maya looked at her for a moment, seeing the sincerity in her eyes. It's not your fault, Sarah. Thank you for being kind. And then she pushed the door open and stepped out into the sunny Chicago morning, leaving behind 2 years of hard work, genuine friendships, and the only stability she had known since moving to the city. The tears flowed freely now, but she quickly wiped them away, straightening her shoulders as she walked down the sidewalk. She still didn't fully understand what had happened, but one thing was clear: her life had changed completely in a matter of minutes, and she would have to find a way to move on. The silence that followed Maya's departure was broken by the sound of dishes being placed down with more force than necessary. In the kitchen, Chef Antoine stopped chopping onions and looked at the door through which Maya had disappeared just moments before. Tu es si passé? He murmured to himself, but his voice carried a tension that everyone around could feel. Thomas returned to the main dining area, his hands trembling slightly as he rearranged menus that didn't need rearranging. Jessica approached him, her eyes still red from held-back tears. Thomas, this doesn't make sense, she whispered, looking around to make sure Sterling wasn't nearby. Maya she never did anything wrong. Never. I know, Thomas replied, his voice low and tense. In 2 years, I've never seen a more dedicated employee. She came in early, left late, knew every dish better than I did, and the customers loved her. Carlos joined them, holding a bottle of wine he had forgotten to open. Did you see Sterling's face last night when Maya started speaking Chinese? There was something strange in that look. Carlos's perception fell over the group like a stone in water, creating waves of uncomfortable understanding. Jessica covered her mouth with her hand. Do you think it was because of that? Because she helped Mr. Lee? Thomas shook his head, but the disbelief in his voice was evident. That would be insane. She saved the situation. Turned a crisis into one of the most beautiful moments I've ever seen here. In the kitchen, Marcus, the sous chef, had completely stopped working. He had known Maya for 2 years, watching her grow from a nervous waitress to one of the best professionals the restaurant had ever had. His hands clenched into fists on the stainless steel counter. This is bullshit, he said to David, one of the line cooks. Maya never did anything but work hard. I remember when she started, always asking questions about the dishes, wanting to understand every ingredient. She really cared. David nodded, his expression grim. And did you see how she always tried to learn Spanish with us? Always respectful, always interested in our culture. She doesn't have a prejudiced bone in her body. So why the hell did Sterling do this? Marcus asked, his voice rising slightly before he remembered to lower it. Sarah appeared at the kitchen entrance, her expression tense and worried. She had been avoiding her colleagues since the incident in the office, but now it seemed she could no longer maintain the professional facade. Sarah, Marcus called, approaching her. What really happened in there? You were in the office. What explanation did he give? Sarah looked around nervously, making sure Sterling was not in sight. He didn't give a real explanation. Just said it was a business decision, that she had abandoned her section. Abandoned her section? Jessica repeated, who had come closer to the kitchen. She helped a panicking customer. That's not abandoning, that's going above and beyond. I know, Sarah said, her voice breaking slightly. I tried to suggest that maybe it was hasty, that Maya was an exemplary employee. But he cut me off immediately. Said the decision was made. Thomas joined the group, his eyebrows furrowed. Sarah, you've worked here for 5 years. Have you ever seen anything like this before? Sarah shook her head slowly. Never. Even employees who were late, who received complaints, who made mistakes, they always got warnings first. Chances to improve. Maya didn't even know she was in trouble. Because she wasn't in trouble, Carlos said, his voice heavy with indignation. She was doing her job better than any of us. In the prep area, Isabella, one of the newer waitresses, was listening to the conversation while folding napkins. She had admired Maya since her first day, seeing in the older colleague an example of professionalism and kindness. You know what I think? She said, her voice young but determined. I think Sterling got intimidated. Did you see how Maya spoke last night? It wasn't just the language, it was like she belonged to that world of wealthy customers. The silence that followed was heavy with realization. Thomas rubbed his forehead, processing the implications of Isabella's words. Are you suggesting he fired her because she was too competent? Not just competent, Carlos interrupted. Sophisticated. Educated. Did you see how she talked to customers about wines, about art? Sometimes I wondered why she was working here, you know? Not in an offensive way, but she clearly had a privileged education. Sarah nodded slowly. I remember a few times when customers asked about French dishes, and Maya not only knew the names but could talk about the regional origins. In perfect French. And last night, Jessica added, the way she addressed Mr. Lee. It wasn't just translation, she knew all the cultural etiquette. The honorifics, the formalities. That comes from deep education. Marcus slammed his fist on the counter, making the utensils jump. So he punished her for being smart? For being educated? For helping a customer? Maybe, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. He realized she wasn't just a waitress. That she could be anything. And that bothered him. The group fell silent, processing the terrible possibility. The idea that Maya had been punished not for doing something wrong, but for revealing her true capabilities, was something none of them wanted to accept. This is sick, Thomas murmured finally. If this is true, it's absolutely sick. David, who had been listening in silence, spoke for the first time. My sister works in human resources. She always says that some bosses get intimidated when their employees are more qualified than they expected. It makes them feel insecure. Insecure about what? Isabella asked. About control, David replied. About hierarchy. If Maya can speak 3 languages, if she understands wines better than the sommelier, if she can talk to wealthy customers as an equal, then what is she doing serving tables? She's making a living, Sarah said, her voice heavy with emotion. Like all of us. There's nothing wrong with honest work. Of course not, David agreed. But some bosses don't see it that way. They want employees who are predictable, who don't make them question their own assumptions. Thomas looked around the group, seeing the same expressions of anger and disgust that he felt himself. So what do we do? Do we just stand here while an injustice like this happens? I don't know, Sarah admitted. But one thing I know, this place won't be the same without Maya. And if Sterling thinks he can treat employees like this, he's very mistaken about the kind of people who work here. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an early customer, forcing everyone to return to their posts. But the tension remained in the air, thick and inescapable. Each employee carried with them the image of Maya gathering her belongings, tears in her eyes, and the complete lack of justice in her dismissal. And as they began to serve lunch, a clear realization began to crystallize in their minds. Maya Chen had been punished not for her failures, but for her virtues. And that realization made the injustice even deeper and more unbearable. James Morrison was at his corner table at Le Bernardin, as he had been every Thursday for the past 3 years. The 42-year-old corporate lawyer appreciated the consistency of the restaurant, the same waiter, Thomas, the same table overlooking the street, the same perfectly prepared fish dish. But the night before, something different had happened. Something that had touched him deeply. He had watched the whole situation with Mr. Lee unfold, his attention initially captured by the visible confusion of the elderly man. As a lawyer, James had a natural instinct for observing human behavior, and he had immediately noticed when Maya approached the Chinese customer's table. What followed was one of the most beautiful displays of compassion and professionalism he had ever witnessed. Without thinking twice, James had taken out his phone and started recording, initially just to show his wife an example of how there were still genuinely kind people in the world. The video captured Maya kneeling beside Mr. Lee's chair, her voice soft and respectful as she spoke in Mandarin. It showed the immediate relief on the elderly man's face, the way his shoulders relaxed, the smile that spread across his face when he realized that someone could understand him. James had saved the video on his phone, thinking he might show it to a few friends. But then, on Thursday night, he returned to Le Bernardin for his usual dinner. "Where is Maya today?" he asked Thomas, noticing that a different waitress was serving the section where he usually saw her. Thomas paused for a moment, his expression turning somber. "Oh, Mr. Morrison. Maya, well, she doesn't work here anymore." "Doesn't work here anymore?" James repeated, confused. "Was she promoted?" "No, sir. She was let go. This morning." James felt as if he had been punched. "Let go? Why?" Thomas looked around nervously before leaning in closer. "Officially, for abandoning her section. But it was right after what she did last night with that Chinese customer. We all thought that." He stopped, clearly reluctant to say more. "What do you all think?" "We think she was punished for helping. For being too good at what she did." James finished his dinner in silence, his mind processing the information. An exemplary employee, fired the day after an extraordinary display of kindness and professional competence. Something was deeply wrong. When he got home that night, he still couldn't get the situation out of his head. His wife, Linda, noticed his concern. "What's bothering you, dear?" James told her the whole story, showing her the video he had recorded. Linda watched with growing indignation. "This is terrible, James. That poor girl was punished for doing the right thing." "I know. I can't stop thinking about it." Linda studied the video again, observing Maya's genuine kindness, Mr. Lee's heartfelt gratitude. "You should post this. People need to see what kind of person she is." "Post where?" "On social media. Twitter, Facebook. Let people see what really happened." James hesitated initially. He was a reserved man, not given to public dramas. But the injustice of the situation troubled him deeply. On Friday morning, he finally made the decision. He posted the video on his Twitter, accompanied by a simple but powerful caption. "This amazing waitress was fired the day after showing extraordinary kindness to a confused customer. Le Bernardin in Chicago needs to explain this injustice. #Justice for Maya #Le Bernardin." Initially, The video received only a few likes and retweets from his followers. But then, something began to happen. People started sharing, commenting, expressing their outrage. In 2 hours, the video had 1,000 views. In 4 hours, 10,000. In 6 hours, it had surpassed 50,000 shares. The comments flowed in like an avalanche of support. This is absolutely outrageous. She was punished for being a decent person? How many languages does she speak? And was she fired for using that skill to help a customer? Does anyone know how we can contact her? I want to offer her a job. This is pure and simple discrimination. I hope she sues that restaurant. What a beautiful kindness. This is what the world needs more of. Shame on Le Bernardin. James watched in growing fascination as his post spread beyond his followers to much larger networks. Local journalists began retweeting. Civil rights activists shared the video. Local celebrities expressed their outrage. By 2 in the afternoon, James's phone rang. It was a reporter from the Chicago Tribune. Mr. Morrison, I'm Michael Chen from the Tribune. We saw your video about the situation at Le Bernardin. Would you be willing to give an interview? Yes, I think so. Excellent. We are also trying to contact Maya Chen. Do you have any information on how we can find her? James realized he didn't even know Maya's full last name until that moment. No, I'm sorry. I only knew her as a customer at the restaurant. I understand. Well, we are investigating the story. We have called Le Bernardin several times, but they refuse to comment beyond saying it's a private personnel matter. As James spoke with the reporter, the video continued to spread. Local news channels began covering the story. The hashtag Justice for Maya was trending in Chicago. At the restaurant, the phone wouldn't stop ringing. Sarah was answering call after call from journalists, bloggers, and outraged people demanding explanations. Le Bernardin, how can I help you? Yes, I'm calling about the waitress who was fired. Do you have any comment? I'm sorry, but personnel matters are private. Is this about discrimination? Was she fired for being Chinese? No, sir, that's not. Sarah hung up, her hands shaking. Sterling had locked himself in his office, refusing to take calls or speak with the staff. Thomas approached the reception, his expression grim. How many calls have there been? I've lost count, Sarah replied. Journalists, angry people, other restaurants offering jobs to Maya if they can reach her. Other restaurants? 3 have already called. They said any employee who treats customers with that kind of kindness would be welcome in their establishments. In the kitchen, Marcus was showing the viral video on his phone to the staff. Look at this. 75,000 shares and counting. This is amazing, David said, reading the comments. People are digging into Maya's background. Someone found out she graduated in literature from Northwestern University. Cum laude. Northwestern? Jessica exclaimed, coming closer. That's an Ivy League school. And look at this. David continued, scrolling through the comments. Someone says she spoke 4 languages, not 3. English, Mandarin, French, and Spanish. And there's a comment from someone saying she was working here to support her family. The reality of the situation began to solidify among the staff. Maya was not just a talented waitress, she was a highly educated woman, working hard to support her family, who had been punished for demonstrating exactly the qualities that should be valued. Meanwhile, in her small apartment on the north side of the city, Maya was sitting at her kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills. She had no idea that her name was spreading across the internet, that thousands of people were outraged on her behalf. She looked at the pile of bills in front of her: rent, electricity, her father's health insurance, student loan payments. Without her salary from Le Bernardin, she had no idea how she would pay for all of this. Her savings were minimal. She had been sending most of her salary to her parents in San Francisco, where her father was recovering from heart surgery. She couldn't stop helping them now. Maya grabbed her laptop and started looking for job listings, but she knew that finding something that paid as well as Le Bernardin would be difficult. Especially without references, she doubted that Sterling would provide a positive recommendation. tears began to stream down her face again. She had worked so hard, had been so careful to never give cause for complaint. And yet, in one morning, everything had crumbled. She had no idea that, at that very moment, her kindness was inspiring thousands of people, that journalists were investigating her story, that job offers were being made by people who didn't even know her. Maya Chin was alone in her kitchen, wondering how she would survive, completely unaware that the world had seen her goodness and decided to fight for her. In the bustling newsroom of the Chicago Tribune, reporter Michael Chin, who had discovered he shared the surname with Maya purely by coincidence, was immersed in an investigation that became more fascinating by the hour. "I found something," he said to his editor, Dan Walsh, as he adjusted his glasses and looked at the computer screen. "Maya Chin is not just a qualified waitress. She has a master's degree in languages and international literature from Northwestern University." Dan leaned closer to Michael's desk, his expression growing more serious. "Northwestern? That's a top-tier university." "Exactly. And she didn't just pass, she graduated magna cum laude. I got a copy of her master's thesis." Michael turned the screen to show the document. "Comparative Analysis of Narrative Structures in Contemporary Chinese and Western Literature. 240 pages of rigorous academic analysis." "My God!" Dan murmured. "And she was waiting tables?" "There's more. I managed to speak with Dr. Patricia Hoffman, who was her thesis advisor." Michael consulted his notes. "She said Maya was one of the brightest students she ever had. Fluent in 4 languages, with exceptional analytical skills and an impeccable work ethic." Dan shook his head, processing the information. "So why was she working as a waitress?" "That's where the story gets complicated," Michael replied, his voice growing softer. "I managed to talk to some former classmates. Apparently, her father was diagnosed with cancer 2 years ago. Stage 3. The treatment cost a fortune, even with health insurance. And she took on the expenses? Not just the medical expenses. Her family are first-generation immigrants. Her parents are still paying immigration lawyers, naturalization fees, and supporting her mother who can't work due to caring for her father." Dan nodded slowly. "So she took the first job she found to help the family." "Exactly. But here's what really makes me furious," Michael continued, his voice laden with indignation. "I found records of her applications over the past 2 years. She applied for positions at universities, translation companies, international consultancies. All suitable for her qualifications. Rejected? Several times. Some didn't even respond. And in the meantime, she was working 60 hours a week as a waitress, sending practically all her salary home." Dan was silent for a moment, the magnitude of the injustice becoming clear. "Publish the story. Front page. And Michael, make sure everyone knows exactly who Maya Chin is." As Michael typed furiously, social media was exploding with new information. Twitter users had found photos of Maya at graduation ceremonies, academic articles she had co-published during her master's, and testimonials from professors. At Prof. Hoffman and you tweeted, "Maya Chin was one of the brightest minds I ever had the privilege to mentor. Her comparative literature analysis was exceptional. Any employer would be lucky to have her." At Northwestern alum posted, "I studied with Maya Chin. She was the kindest and smartest person in our class. She spoke Mandarin with our international classmates when they needed help. Always put others first." At Chicago Linguist shared, "Maya Chin presented a brilliant paper on cultural translation at the American Literary Association conference. She is a serious scholar, not just a talented waitress." At Le Bernardin, Sterling was locked in his office, the phone ringing incessantly. He had shut down his computer after seeing the first negative comments online, but he couldn't escape the calls. "Mr. Sterling?" came Sarah's voice over the intercom. "Mr. Richard Blackwell is online too. He said he's from the investor board." Sterling felt his stomach drop. Richard Blackwell was one of the restaurant's major investors, a man he had only met twice in formal meetings. "Hello, Mr. Blackwell," Sterling said, trying to keep his voice steady. Sterling, what the hell is going on there? Blackwell's voice was cold and cutting. I'm getting calls from other investors about some viral video. Something about you improperly firing an employee. Mr. Blackwell, this is just a personnel issue that's being exaggerated. Exaggerated? I just read an article from the Tribune about a woman with a master's degree that you fired for helping a customer. Is that true? Sterling hesitated, sweating. Well, the circumstances are more complex then. Answer the question, Sterling. Is it true that you fired an employee the day after she demonstrated exceptional competence? Aye, she left her section to help a customer in need, using skills you clearly didn't know she possessed. Blackwell's voice was growing colder. Sterling, do you have any idea what kind of negative publicity this is generating? Our reservation numbers are already dropping. Dropping? 17 cancellations just this morning. And that's just the beginning. When people find out you fired a brilliant academic for doing her job too well, it doesn't reflect well on our establishment. Sterling was starting to panic. What do you suggest I do? First, you're going to fix this. Immediately. Second, you're going to explain to me exactly why you made that decision. And Sterling? Yes, sir? You better have a very good explanation. Because if this continues, we're going to have to consider changes in management. The line went silent, leaving Sterling staring at the phone with growing horror. He finally turned on his computer and saw the extent of the disaster. Maya's video had over 200,000 views. The hashtag Justice for Maya was trending. Negative comments about the restaurant were multiplying. And then he saw the job offer starting to appear at Chicago Museum. If Maya Chin is looking for a job, our International Programs Department would love to talk to her. At University of Chicago. Maya Chin, if you're interested in teaching or research positions, please contact us. At Translation Corpchi. 5 years of experience with a Northwestern PhD? Maya Chin, you have a position waiting here. Sterling realized with growing horror that he had not only made a mistake, but possibly destroyed his own career in the process. Meanwhile, Maya was sitting at her kitchen table, still surrounded by unpaid bills, when her phone rang. It was her college friend, Jennifer Chang. Maya! My God, did you see? See what? Maya asked, confused. The video. You're everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, the Tribune just published an article about you. What video? Jennifer, what are you talking about? Wait, you really don't know? Jennifer's voice softened. Maya, someone filmed you helping that Chinese customer at the restaurant. They posted it online, and now everyone is furious because you were fired. Maya felt as if the world was spinning. Filmed? Who? A customer. Maya, there are 200,000 people watching you being kind to that elderly man. And when they found out you were fired, people went crazy. Crazy how? Job offers, Maya. Universities, museums, translation companies. Everyone wants to hire you. And there's more they found out about your qualifications. About Northwestern, about your masters. Maya, you're famous. Maya sat heavily in her chair, trying to process the information. Jennifer, I don't want to be famous. I just want to work. Well, now you're going to have choices. Lots of choices. Maya, you touched people. They saw who you really are, not just a waitress, but a brilliant and kind woman who deserves so much more than she was getting. After hanging up with Jennifer, Maya finally opened her laptop and found the video. She watched herself kneeling beside Mr. Lee, speaking softly in Mandarin, saw the gratitude in his eyes. And then she read the comments, thousands of them, all expressing outrage at her firing and admiration for her kindness. Tears began to stream down her face again. But this time they were different. They were not tears of despair, but of something she hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Maybe, just maybe, doing the right thing would finally lead to something good. David Morrison was in his office on the 42nd floor of the Willis Tower when his assistant, Rebecca, entered with an unusual expression. Mr. Morrison, you need to see this, she said, extending her tablet. It's about a situation that's going viral on social media. David, CEO of Global Connect International for 8 years, was used to Rebecca filtering important information. If she thought he needed to see something, it was usually worth it. He watched the video of Maya kneeling beside Mr. Lee, observing the transformation on the elderly man's face as she began to speak in Mandarin. David had built his career in international communication and recognized genuine talent when he saw it. Interesting, he murmured, reading the comments. She was fired for doing this? Yes, sir. And here's the part that really caught my attention. Rebecca scrolled down, showing the Tribune article. She has a master's degree in languages and international literature from Northwestern. Magna cum laude. David raised his eyebrows. Northwestern? And she was waiting tables? To pay for her father's cancer treatment. For 2 years, she has been applying for positions suitable for her qualifications, but without success. David studied the article more closely, his executive mind already processing possibilities. Rebecca, what positions do we have open in the International Projects Department? We've been looking for an international project coordinator for 3 months. It requires fluency in multiple languages, experience with different cultures, and exceptional communication skills. Exactly what this young woman demonstrated in the video, David said, leaning back in his chair. Can you find contact information for Maya-chan? I'm already working on it, sir. 2 hours later, David was typing a carefully crafted email. Dear Ms. Chen. My name is David Morrison, CEO of Global Connect International. I saw the video of your interaction with the client at Le Bernardin and was deeply impressed not only by your kindness but by your clearly exceptional professional skills. After researching your qualifications, I would like to offer you an opportunity that I believe aligns with your education and talents. I would like to discuss with you a position as an international project coordinator in our company. If you can attend an interview, it would be an honor to meet you in person. Sincerely, David Morrison. Maya was in the middle of responding to yet another job offer email when she received David's message. She had received dozens of offers since the story went viral, but something about this email was different. More professional, more direct. She quickly researched Global Connect International. It was a respected company specializing in facilitating communication and projects between American and international businesses. Exactly the type of work she had studied for. The following Tuesday, Maya found herself nervously in the elevator of the Willis Tower, wearing her only professional suit. She hadn't had a formal interview in months, and the pressure of all the media attention was weighing on her. Rebecca warmly welcomed her at the reception. Ms. Chen, it's a pleasure to meet you. Mr. Morrison is looking forward to speaking with you. David's office was sleek yet welcoming, with windows offering a spectacular view of Chicago. He stood up when Maya entered, extending his hand with a genuine smile. Ms. Chen, thank you for coming. Please have a seat. Maya sat down, her hands slightly trembling. Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Morrison. I'll be direct with you, David said, sitting across from her. I don't need a traditional interview. I've already seen your most important qualification. My qualification? Your humanity. Your ability to connect with people from different cultures, to make them feel seen and valued. That can't be taught in any school. Maya felt her cheeks flush. I just did what felt natural. Exactly. And combined with your exceptional education and fluency in 4 languages, you are exactly what our company needs. David leaned forward. Some people saw a threat in your skills. I see a talent that the world needs. What exactly does this position involve? You would be responsible for coordinating projects between our American client companies and their international counterparts. Mainly in Asia, but also in Europe and Latin America. Translations, cultural mediation, project management. You would utilize all your skills. Maya felt her heart race. It was exactly the type of work she had dreamed of during her master's program. And the salary? $85,000 a year to start, with full health benefits and advancement opportunities based on performance. Additionally, When you travel for international projects, all expenses will be covered. Maya was silent for a moment, trying to process the numbers. It was more than double what she earned at Le Bernardin. She could finally not only pay the bills but truly help her family in a meaningful way. Ms. Chun? David asked gently. Are you interested? Tears began to form in Maya's eyes. Mr. Morrison, for 2 years I have been applying for positions like this. 24 rejections. I started to think maybe I wasn't good enough. You are more than good enough. You are exactly what we were looking for, we just didn't know it yet. So, yes, Maya said, her voice slightly trembling. I accept. David smiled broadly. Excellent. Can you start next Monday? As Maya experienced this incredible turnaround in her life, Sterling's situation at Le Bernardin was deteriorating rapidly. The Illinois Human Rights Commission investigation had officially opened after dozens of discrimination complaints. Mr. Sterling, Thomas said, along with Jessica and Marcus, entering his office on Wednesday morning. We need to talk to you. Sterling looked up from his desk, surrounded by legal documents and grim financial reports. What is it? We're handing in our resignation letters, Thomas said, placing an envelope on the desk. We can no longer work for someone who treats employees the way Maya was treated. All of you? Sterling asked incredulously. 6 of us, Jessica confirmed. And more people are considering leaving. What you did was wrong, and now that we know who Maya really is, it's even worse. Marcus stepped closer to the desk. She had a PhD, man. Spoke 4 languages. And you fired her for being too good at her job. After they left, Sterling sat alone in his office, the sound of protests filtering through the windows. Labor rights activists had gathered on the sidewalk with signs saying, "Justice for Maya," and workplace discrimination. Restaurant reservations had dropped by 50%. Online reviews were filled with negative comments. 3 newspaper articles had been published about the situation, each painting Sterling as an incompetent and possibly discriminatory manager. His phone rang again. This time it was the company's lawyer. Sterling, we have a problem. The Human Rights Commission wants to formally interview you. And there are talks about a possible wrongful termination lawsuit. Sterling hung up the phone and put his head in his hands. In less than a week, he had gone from manager of a successful restaurant to the center of a media storm that could destroy his career. On Thursday night, Maya was sitting at her kitchen table, this time not surrounded by unpaid bills but by hiring papers and orientation materials from Global Connect. She had spent the entire day filling out forms, undergoing medical exams for company insurance, and preparing for her new life. Finally, she picked up the phone and dialed San Francisco. "Mom," she said when her mother answered. "Maya, my daughter! How are you? We saw the news online. We can't believe it. Mom, I have amazing news. I got a new job. A real job, using my education." "Oh, Maya!" her mother exclaimed, and Maya could hear tears in her voice. "Tell me everything." Maya explained about David Morrison, about Global Connect, about the salary and benefits. She heard her mother crying tears of joy on the other end of the line. "Wait, let me call your father," her mother said. "He's resting, but he will want to hear this." A few moments later, the weak but proud voice of her father came through the phone. "My brave daughter," he said in Mandarin. "I always knew your kindness and intelligence would be recognized. You didn't give up, even when it was hard. Dad, now I can really help you. I can pay for the treatments, I can help with the bills, I can—" "Maya," her father gently interrupted. "You have already done more than any daughter should do. Now it's time for you to build your own life. We are very proud of you." Maya closed her eyes, allowing the tears to fall freely. For the first time in years, she was not crying out of despair or frustration. She was crying out of gratitude, relief, and hope. Her kindness had been seen. Her worth had been recognized. 6 months later, Maya was sitting at her new desk on the 38th floor of Global Connect International, finishing up a project proposal in Mandarin for an American company looking to expand into the Chinese market. The view of Chicago stretched out before her, but Maya barely noticed. She was completely absorbed in her work. "Maya, do you have a minute?" David Morrison asked, appearing in the doorway of her office. "Of course, Mr. Morrison," she replied, saving the document and turning to face him. "First, how many times do I have to ask you to call me David?" he said with a smile. "Second, I just got a call from Johnson and Associates. They were so impressed with your work on the Shanghai Electronics project that they want to expand the contract to include 3 additional countries." Maya felt a wave of satisfaction. "Really? They liked the presentation? Liked it?" "Maya, they said it was the most professional and culturally sensitive presentation they had ever seen. The CEO of Shanghai Electronics specifically mentioned how you made him feel truly understood." "That's amazing," Maya said, still sometimes surprised when her work was recognized and valued. "And there's more. You know the company's international conference is next week?" Maya nodded. The annual Global Connect conference brought together clients and partners from around the world in Chicago. "I want you to be our keynote speaker. You'll demonstrate how effective intercultural communication can transform international business." Maya felt a mix of nervousness and excitement. "I would be honored." "Excellent. And Maya? You deserve this. These 6 months have proven that you are not only talented but essential to our success." After David left, Maya looked around her office. On the walls were certificates of her recent achievements, a Communication Excellence Award, an honorable mention from the Chicago Chamber of Commerce, and a photo of her with the team after closing a $5 million deal. But what really made her smile was the new photo on her desk, her parents in front of the house she had managed to rent for them in a safe neighborhood in San Francisco. Her father was smiling, looking much better after the advanced treatments that Maya could now afford. Her mother stood beside him, beaming with pride. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Maya Chin," she answered professionally. "Maya, it's Jennifer. Did you see the news about Le Bernardin?" "No, what happened?" "The investigation is over. Sterling was found guilty of workplace discrimination. He was fined, had to implement mandatory diversity training, and will have to report hiring practices to the Commission for 2 years." Maya was silent for a moment. She had vaguely followed the case, but she was so focused on her new life that she hadn't paid much attention. "And the restaurant?" she asked. "Struggling to survive. They lost a lot of good staff after you left. Reservations are still low. There are rumors they might have to close." Maya felt a pang of sadness, not for Sterling, but for the innocent employees still working there. "That's sad. Maya, don't you feel even a little vindicated?" "You know, Jennifer? I feel at peace. What happened to me led to something much better. I can't feel anger when I'm so grateful." The following week, the grand ballroom of the Palmer House Hilton was filled with executives from companies around the world. Maya was backstage, checking her presentation one last time. She wore a stylish navy blue suit that she had bought specifically for the occasion, the first truly new suit she had owned in years. "Ladies and gentlemen," David Morrison announced from the podium, "it is my great pleasure to introduce one of our most valuable team members, Maya Chin, our Senior International Projects Coordinator." Maya walked confidently to the podium, looking out at the audience of 200 people. 6 months ago, she would have been terrified. Now she felt at home. "Good morning, everyone," she began in English. "Buenos dias, bonjour, zhao shanghao." The audience smiled, immediately engaged. "Today, I want to talk about the power of true intercultural communication. Not just translating words, but translating intentions, emotions, and cultures." Maya spent the next 20 minutes smoothly navigating between English, Spanish, French, and Mandarin, depending on the example she was presenting. She shared stories of successful projects, demonstrated how cultural misunderstandings could be avoided, and showed how genuine empathy created lasting business connections. "When we respect not just what people say, but who they are," she concluded, "we're not just doing business. We're building bridges." The audience erupted in applause. Maya saw David Morrison in the front row, smiling with genuine pride. Next to him, several clients were rising in ovation. After the presentation, Maya was surrounded by business cards and collaboration offers. Executives from companies in Germany, Japan, and Brazil wanted to work specifically with her. "Ms. Chen," said an elegant woman with a British accent, "I'm Catherine Wells from the International Business Council. We would like to invite you to speak at our conference in London next month." Maya smiled, accepting the card. "I would be honored." Later that night, Maya was in her apartment, a real one-bedroom apartment with a view of Lake Michigan, not the cramped studio she had lived in before. She was typing a message on LinkedIn, something she had been thinking about doing for weeks. A message to immigrant families struggling to find their way. 6 months ago, I was a waitress with a master's degree, working 60 hours a week just to survive. Today, I presented to international business leaders and am building the career I've always dreamed of. What changed wasn't my qualifications, they were always there. What changed was that someone finally saw my value. To all of you applying for jobs that seem impossible, who are overqualified but underemployed, who are working below your capabilities to support your families, your talents are your strength. Your education matters. Your cultural experience is valuable, not a disadvantage. Keep being kind, keep being professional, keep being yourselves. The right opportunity will come when you stay true to who you are. Sometimes, doing the right thing at the right time changes everything. With hope and solidarity. Maya Chin. Maya read the message one last time before posting it. She thought of Mr. Lee, the elderly man who had inadvertently changed her life simply by needing help. She thought of her choice to kneel beside him, to speak in his native language, to treat him with the dignity he deserved. She could never have imagined that this moment of spontaneous compassion would lead to all of this. But reflecting on the last 6 months, Maya realized it hadn't been luck. It had been the convergence of preparation, opportunity, and most importantly, the refusal to compromise her values even when it seemed to cost her career. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her father. "My daughter, we watched your presentation online." Mom cried with pride. "You proved that kindness and intelligence always win." Maya smiled, typing back. "I learned from the best teachers." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the lights of Chicago spreading infinitely in all directions. Somewhere out there, she knew, were others like her, talented, educated, working below their capabilities, waiting for their chance. Her story had gone viral not just because of the injustice, but because of the hope it represented. Proof that integrity and compassion, in the end, triumph over prejudice and fear. And maybe, just maybe, her message would reach someone who needed to hear that their talents were enough, that their kindness was a strength, and that the right opportunity would find them when they stayed true to themselves. Maya Chin had learned that sometimes life changes not when you give up your principles, but when you refuse to abandon them. And in that refusal, she had found not just a career, but her true calling.
If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. These other stories will also move you. Click to keep watching.